Howdy, partners. The Wild West, huh? You think you know, but you have no idea. Yeah, it was full of brave pioneers, outlaws, and lawmen. But it was also full of absolute idiots doing insane things that make Florida man look normal. Like seriously, these folks were the OG kings and queens of questionable choices. Picture this. Saloons stinkier than a camel's armpit, shootouts over spilled whiskey, and laws so strange they'd make your head spin faster than a tumbleweed in a tornado. We're talking about the kind of stuff that never made it into those fancy history books. Today, we're diving into the most ridiculous, outrageous, and totally real Wild West moments history books conveniently forgot to mention. So saddle up, grab yourself a sarsaparilla or something stronger, and get ready for some Wild West WTF. Now you gotta understand, the Wild West was kinda like a lawless land, right? Well, not exactly. They had laws, but some of these laws were so bizarre they'd make a coyote howl with laughter. Take Tombstone, Arizona, for instance. You know, that dusty town where Wyatt Earp and the Clantons had their little showdown at the OK Corral? Well, in Tombstone, if you dared to walk down the street with more than 20 feet of rope, you were in for a heap of trouble, partner. They figured you were up to no good, probably rustling cattle or something. Then there was Abilene, Kansas. This town was known for its cattle drives and its rather peculiar aversion to, wait for it, frowning. Yep, you heard that right. If the sheriff caught you walking around with a grumpy look on your face, he could slap you with a fine. I guess everyone in Abilene was just naturally cheerful, or maybe really good at faking it. And hold your horses because it gets even weirder. In some towns, swearing in public could land you in the slammer. Unless, of course, you were a cowboy. Seems like those rough-riding, cattle-wrangling fellas had a special dispensation for colorful language. Imagine that. You're a shopkeeper trying to sell your wares and some buckaroo saunters in, spitting out curses like they're going out of style. You try to tell him to watch his language, and he just tips his hat, flashes a grin, and says, "Sorry, ma'am, it's the law. Wild West logic, folks. Wild West logic." Alright, let's talk about gunfights. You know, those iconic Wild West showdowns where two gunslingers face off in the middle of a dusty street? Yeah, well, in reality, those gunfights were often more like slapstick comedy than epic duels. Take Ellsworth, Kansas, for instance. Back in 1869, Wild Bill Hickok was the town marshal, and let me tell you, he had his hands full. One day, two cowboys, both drunker than a skunk on payday, decided to settle an argument over a card game with a duel. They stumbled out into the street, guns drawn, and proceeded to miss each other with every shot. The whole town watched in amusement as these two yahoos emptied their six-shooters without so much as grazing each other. Then there was the time in Dodge City when a couple of cowboys got into a heated argument over who was a better shot. They decided to have a shootout, but with a twist. They'd shoot at each other's hats. Yep, you heard that right, hats. Well, the first shot went off, and one fella's hat went flying. The other cowboy, thinking he'd won, started celebrating a little too early. Turns out, his own hat was missing too. It seems a stray bullet had clipped it clean off his head without him even noticing. These gunfights were supposed to be tense, dramatic affairs, but more often than not, they ended up as farcical displays of ineptitude. I guess even the toughest cowboys weren't immune to a little bit of clumsiness. Chapter 3. Wild West Medicine, Hold Your Nose and Pray. Alright, so you're in the Wild West, right? You're eating your weight in beans and bacon, drinking whiskey like it's water, and brawling with grizzly bears in your spare time. Point is, you're bound to get sick or injured at some point, so what do? Well, you hope and pray you don't end up in the hands of a Wild West doctor. See, back then, medicine was more about guesswork and folklore than actual science. Doctors were like bartenders with medical licenses, mixing up concoctions that were more likely to kill you than cure you. Take Dr. McGribble's radiated mercury elixir, for instance. This miracle cure promised to treat everything from syphilis to baldness. Of course, it didn't actually cure anything, and it probably gave you a whole new set of problems like, you know, mercury poisoning. Then there was snake oil, which, surprise, surprise, didn't actually contain any snake oil. It was mostly just a mix of mineral oil, herbs, and sometimes a little bit of opium to keep the customers coming back for more. And let's not forget about those tonics that were all the rage back then. These potent potions were often a delightful blend of radium, alcohol, and cocaine. Yeah, you heard that right, radium. I guess they figured if it glows in the dark, it must be good for you, right? The Wild West was a tough place to live, and it wasn't just because of the outlaws and the harsh conditions. Sometimes the cure was worse than the disease, and the best way to stay healthy was to avoid doctors altogether. Chapter 4. That time a beer-drinking goat became mayor. Now, I've seen a lot of crazy things in my day, but this one takes the cake. We're talking about a town in Texas called Lajitas. Now, Lajitas was your typical Wild West town, full of cowboys, saloons, and apparently, a thirst for political change. You see, Back in the 1980s, the folks in Lajitas got tired of the usual political shenanigans. They wanted a leader who was honest, hardworking, and well, not a human. So what did they do? They elected a beer-drinking goat named Clay Henry as their mayor. That's right, you heard me correctly, a goat. Mayor Clay Henry became a national sensation, attracting tourists from far and wide who were eager to meet the four-legged leader of this quirky little town. And let me tell you, Mayor Clay Henry was living the high life. He had his own private pen behind the town hall, a custom-made saddle, and of course all the beer he could drink. Now, you might think this is just a silly story, but Mayor Clay Henry's reign lasted for years. He became a beloved figure in Lajitas, a symbol of the town's independent spirit and its ability to laugh at itself. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to live in a town where the mayor is a beer-drinking goat? Chapter 5. Bar fights over pickles and arm wrestling? Alright, let's be honest here, no discussion about the Wild West would be complete without mentioning those legendary bar fights. You know, the ones that start with a spilled drink and end with half the saloon in splinters? Well, in the Wild West it seems like folks were looking for any excuse to throw down. Take Virginia City, Nevada for instance. This boomtown was full of miners with pockets full of gold and a thirst for trouble. One night, two miners got into a brawl over, get this, the last pickle in the jar. Yep, that's right, a pickle. Apparently these two fellas were mighty partial to their pickled cucumbers, and they were willing to fight to the death over the last one. Then there was the infamous arm wrestling contest in Deadwood, South Dakota. Now, arm wrestling might sound like harmless fun, but in Deadwood, it was serious business. One fateful night, two cowboys locked hands, determined to prove their strength and dominance. The crowd gathered around, hooting and hollering as the two men strained against each other. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a Bowie knife. And what was the prize for this epic display of masculinity? Bragging rights, of course. Look, I'm no psychologist, but it seems like these Wild West folks had a knack for turning the most mundane things into a knockdown, drag-out brawl. Maybe it was the heat, maybe it was the whiskey, or maybe they were just itching for an excuse to let off some steam. The Wild West wasn't all John Wayne grit and Clint Eastwood stares. It was messy, dumb, and full of people making terrible decisions on a daily basis. And you know what? That's what makes it fun to talk about. If you enjoyed this ridiculous ride through America's rowdiest days, hit like, subscribe, and comment your favorite Wild West WTF moment. There's a lot more where this came from. Until next time, keep your snake oil sealed and your duels sober. Yeehaw.